Well, thank you to thank you for being here for our first panel of the day on the red stage, which is the title of the session is Automate Your User Access Review, Customer Testimonial. And with us today to introduce the topic is to my left, Bob Besharat. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Thank you very much. Who is the Executive VP of Research and Development and Security Portfolio and Chief Innovation Officer at NewPush. Mr. Besharat has over 25 years of experience of driving strategy, information risk management, security architecture, solution and policy design, as well as strategic consulting. His executive experience spans cybersecurity, managed services, cloud computing, and advanced analytic. And with him is the founder of Brainwave. He's general manager, CTO, and founder of Brainwave. His name is Sébastien Favre, and he's going to, and both of them are going to talk to us today about panel. Gentlemen, all yours.
Thank you. So we'll actually run this presentation in English. Is it okay for you, Bob?
That's perfect. Sorry about my lack of...
So with a French accent for me. Okay, so we'll spend 30 minutes together discussing about user access review. And we will have the pleasure to have Bob with us. So Bob will present a customer use case. Bob is a partner of the Brainwave company, and they actually have deployed the Brainwave solution. So he will give you some very interesting feedback about all the values that you can have by deploying and running automated user access review in a large environment. So my name is Sebastian. I'm General Manager of Brainwave, and Bob is with me. Okay, so perhaps just prior to start this presentation, just a quick poll, if you can just raise your hand. So how many of you have already performed user access review in their company? Okay. And actually, are you running this on a regular basis? I mean, more than once a year? Yep. Okay. And would you say that your business user loves running user access review? You know, when you send an email, do they love this? No. Not really, right? Okay. So it's a real, I mean, this is a real problem, the real issue. Actually, user access review is a mandatory process by which you ask all the stakeholders, all those people, the first line of defense, basically, to review on a regular basis that those users can access to the right level of information to do the job. Therefore, by running user access review, what you do is that you enforce what is called the least privilege principle. User access review is very important, basically, because as of today, if I start by, the middle one here, this is actually the best way to enforce security and to protect the company. And the primary reason is because when you run a user access review, what you do is that you ask to the people who are in charge, actually, if all those access rights are properly configured. So ultimately, it helps you to reduce your attack surface, because really it helps you to have the right properly configured from a business perspective. So this is not apart from the business, this is part of the business, you know. So this is very important to run user access review on a regular basis and to actually secure your user access review process. On top of this, user access review is now a mandatory requirement of most of the, let's say, the compliance frameworks. So you can find user access review in ISO 27K, in SOC 2, Sarbanes-Oxley most of the time hands up with reviewing financial access to the data system, to the access to the financial systems. You find user access review on a PCI DSS as well. SOC 2, of course, you have user access review. So no matter actually if you love running user access review or not, if you are faced with compliance constraints, you need to run user access review. That's a fact. The final thing is actually it's all about data quality. we're moving in a world where we're going through, we're moving from an on-prem world to a cloud world. In a cloud world, you move from a perpetual license to subscription. The subscription model most of the time is based on the number of active user. And you know what? The less the data quality, the higher the cost. So running user access review is also a way to improve your data quality posture and therefore to save cost, because it can help you to identify all those accounts or all those access that are no longer used, and you can remove them and therefore improve your cost, the global cost. That being said, running user access review on a manual basis is very difficult, really. The primary reason is because when you want to run a user access review, what you have to do is that you have to consolidate everything in the company in order ultimately to understand who can access to what in the company. So whatever the system. So you end up with a very large Excel spreadsheets with VLOOKUP and VLOOKUP and VLOOKUP, and you try to consolidate everything. This is very difficult to do, to run this on a manual basis. And beyond that, actually, when you think about all those new resources, such as the cloud environment, where you no longer can just export this information. You need to connect through API to all those systems, such as Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Dropbox, Box, and the rest. You end up in a total mess, where really, on a manual basis, you're lacking some part of your IT system. So for some part of your IT system on a manual basis, really, you do not know who can access to what. So you need to find a solution in order to grab and correlate all this information in order really to understand who can access to what, which is actually a requirement in order to run user access review. Of course, in order to mitigate your risk, you need to run those user access review on a regular basis, and basically also identifying on focusing your effort on the recent changes. And once again, without the proper tooling, this is very difficult to perform. And ultimately, never forget that a user access review is something that those business users won't want to do at the end of the day. They do not want to run or participate in a user access review. They have just, let's say, overall 5 minutes of their time to run or to review the access. So what you do not want to end up is a system where on Monday you're reviewing Active Directory data, on Tuesday, you're reviewing Okta data. On Wednesday, it will be CyberArk. And on Thursday, it will be SailPoint. On Friday, it will be the rest through Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Because at the end of the day, those business users will say, OK, I do not want to run user access review anymore. It's too time consuming, So I want to just have this consolidated in a single business relevant way in order for me, within 5 minutes, to be able to review everything. And this is something that you cannot do with a tool. So this is really the idea. The idea is to move from a situation where you're running this on a manual basis here, consolidating everything, running access review through Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, trying to figure out how to somehow mitigate all the requested changes, to another posture, security posture, where everything is fully automated, and ultimately you have informed decision to your business users, so they can run their business access, their user access review within 5 minutes and in an actionable way, really. So we're Web, we're specialists in identity analytics. We do provide actually a solution which helps you to understand who can access to what in the company, and we do automate control, ITGC control, segregation of duties control, user access certification as well. This is our job. This is what we do for 12 years by now. And I have the pleasure to welcome Bob, who will explain you what has been done in a large customer environment.
Thank you. As Sebastian mentioned, the world of reviews are getting more complicated and complicated every day. And that's not because of the increase in the application footprint, but rather the complexity of those applications and the agility of the applications being provided to the user community. So to that end, when we embarked our relationship just about a decade ago, we had an in-depth understanding of this space quite well. We knew who were the key players, we knew their strengths, we knew their weaknesses, and so on and so forth. So when we started working with Brainwave, we were not looking for a tool that would be able to go and fetch all the identities and their privileges and entitlements, but rather understand the business part of the application's landscape and overall operating environment within the client. So that our relationship started on that premise that we weren't looking for a normal tool, but a tool that is precise enough to be able to understand the security model of the applications and therefore be able to provide us the input needed for the thorough user access review. So in this particular use case, we were working with a university conglomerate. They own 75 universities across 4 continents with over 2.5, 3 million students. And it's hard to say how many users because the students register and they graduate and drop and so on and so forth. But it was in a neighborhood of north of 2 million. And what we end up doing for the client was that we actually narrow the scope to what's matter and what's really important. And we end up having settle around 50,000 or so sensitive and potentially privileged accounts. So rather than going through doing the reviews for that large number, we really brought the risk into the area where it would matter to the corporation. So when we start to look at when we got engaged with the client, they already had a material weakness. So I don't know how many of you guys have heard of material weakness. Can you raise your hand and tell me if you know what material weakness is? Okay. Material weakness is a repeated fracture into a SOX regulations for public companies that are listed in the stock exchange. And it's quite severe because if it's not addressed within the period of time agreed upon by the auditors, it would yield in delisting that company. So you can imagine if the company is a public company with billions of assets, if they're not able to meet that material weakness within the period of time, they will be delisted. So that, needless to say, had a lot of attention from the board of directors. So when we engaged with this company, they already had found to have a material weakness. And that is after they had a fairly powerful and well-known GRC tool in place. And the reason that they had that was because their reviews did not include all the details required that aligned with the security model of the application, meaning that they did miss a segment of the population that otherwise would have not been reviewed using the normal ways of acquiring the data set. So we start to look into their landscape. Obviously, we found that there was a significant amount of fine-grained accesses that resulted into a fairly sensitive access to financial applications that usually is in the scope of the SOX reviews. And with the help of Brainwave, we were able to, within 24 hours or so, answer a lot of questions of the executives that at the time weren't able to be answered quite efficiently. I remember the discussion we had with the CIO of that corporation, and his question to us was, can you tell me how many people will access to my CEO's email? And we ran a query, and we were able to answer that in a fairly efficient manner. But then we told them, I said, that usually is not a really right question to be asked. It's not the identity you have access. Can you find out how many accounts they are that have access to the executive's email address? Do you guys understand the difference between the identity and accounts? Raise a hand. Perfect. So for those of us to just capture it, identity is a unique way of identifying an individual, and it doesn't have to be a person. It can be an asset, it can be a system, it can be a process. The way that you identify them has to be uniquely identified. The accounts are the privileges and entitlement that this identity has within the given application. And that application can be your email account, or it can be your financial application. So that was where the problem started. They had a very good understanding of who their identities were, but they had a bit of insufficient way of identifying the accounts within the targeted applications. And we were talking about north of 680, 700 applications at a time. So it wasn't a small amount of applications either. They had significant amount of application. So what we started to dive into really was how do we start collecting the information in a systematic manner removing a lot of duplicity and errorness that resulted in gathering the data manually. So we were able to directly go into the application, understand the security model of the application, and start bringing the data systematically, flow it into our validations and verifications, end it into Brainwave that allowed us to do the UAR. So the previous organization that was involved in the result of the UAR had promised them that they onboard about 60 or 80 applications a year. So when you're talking about the 600 and 700 applications, that took them 3-4 years before they get there. And we actually looked at the way that they onboarded. They were onboarded. There is no question that they were not. But they were not onboarded in a manner that allowed them to have visibility into the fine-grained accesses that the individual have. So there was a lot of inherited accesses. There were a lot of cursive access that they were not discovered. And there were a lot of implied accesses that they had. So for all of that, we were able to, I think on average, we did 40 applications per 2 months. So within a year, we had about 280, 300 applications onboarded. And then we went back to them and we told them that it may not be necessary to have all the 640 applications onboarded because those applications either do not house a sensitive information or they're not in the scope of the SOX review. And one of the outcome of that was that within the year, they were able to demonstrate back to the same auditors. And by the way, there are two types of auditors. There are auditors that are assigned by SEC, that they come on behalf of the security exchange and audit you. And they're the ones that they have to report to for reporting purposes. So there are two sets of auditors. There are internal and external audits. So we were able to, within a period of 9 months, they had up to a year, by the way, to address that material weakness. So it was very time sensitive. Within a year, if they would have not done that, they would have run the risk of being delisted. So it was a very high tensional environment that we had to work with. But given that, we were able within 9 months to satisfy the auditors enough that they actually waived that material weakness for the next year's financial reporting. And that was a major achievement for them because it allowed them the continuity of their business. One of the results of that, outside of the regulatory measure, was our ability to streamline the reviews. The reviews didn't have to go through 5 different processes before it ended up in the hand of the reviewers. And they're starting to do that systematically. How are we doing with times? We're doing okay with time? Perfect. And one of the things that we really liked was the ability to customize the way the access reviews are in fact reviewed by the approvers. Because the way that they have done that in the past using different tool was that they follow a very systematic manner, having to go through 3-4 different levels of approval, and it was very customized. As a result, there was a lot of inefficiency in the way that they customize it. So we sat down with the business owners, with application owners, with auditors, and we come up with the framework that allowed them to standardize the review by which the accesses were reviewed on a quarterly basis. By the way, they had to do the quarterly reviews. So if you can imagine, if they have 400 applications, every quarter they had to review 100 of them, so that within the year, all applications were 100% reviewed. So that was fairly substantial. We had to go back and forth, and there was a lot of business discussion to be had. And at the end of it, we were able to come up with, 3 or 4 workflow that allowed us to bring every applications into this workflow. What I say workflow is who approves the accesses for target accounts, right? Managers would know who the accesses have the best, and their application owner would know who should have access to their applications. Sometimes their internal auditors that they need to be reviewed. So that is streamlined, helped them a great deal. Another area where we found that we could really help the client was our ability to provide the results of the review in a manner that was coherent to the audiences that they were looking at the data. So if you look at the data from the eyes of the auditors, they really don't care about how many accounts you reviewed. They really don't care about how many applications they reviewed. They're looking at the sensitive accounts that they were not part of your scope. And they have a way of doing that because very similar to us in acquiring the data, they do the acquiring the data in their own way. I mean, they look at all the peripheral processes, they narrow down and focus on a number of processes, and they come back through what is known as accuracy and timeliness. They will acquire the data. So one of the ways that we had to do is we had to present the data differently to the different audiences. CEO wouldn't really have an idea as to how many people were reviewed. CEO wanted to report, in this case it was a NIST-aligned reporting. They wanted to report in NIST-aligned. Same thing with the CIO, same thing with the CISO. And we were able to provide them in a manner that actually allowed them to see the progress during the course of their UARs. So in this case, for example, this is actually a true revision. This is for one of our clients in the federal sector. And what you see on the left side are the divisions or agencies within that federal sector. And on the column called identify, which is the detections and reviews of the access, you can see within a couple of years, they were able to go from NIST-aligned, really, not a very good situation, to be in a situation that was amicable by their auditors. So I think I'll stop right now, Sebastian, if it's okay, and then open it up for questions. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. So thank you, Bob.
Pleasure.
Thank you. I will just
Thank you.
I grab this.
Oh, I thought you were going to dismiss me. All right.
No problems. Okay, so time for questions. Is there some questions in the audience? Or was it clear enough? Okay. So as a conclusion, actually. So as a conclusion, don't underestimate the data quality issues that you can face when you're entering into this journey. So really the very first thing, in order for internal control, ITGC control, user access review to be a success, is to be able to present relevant data to the business user. Because at the end of the day, they won't have more than 5 minutes of their time to spend to running those control. And I mean, really the situation where you do not want to end up with is a situation where they just push back those information by saying, okay, by the way, those people are no longer working for the company since, let's say, 3 or 4 years by now, so please review your data quality issues and then come back to me later. So this is the very first thing. Mm-hmm. So the idea really, when you're entering into this journey, in order to work all along with those business people, is to consolidate and correlate everything in order to have really this accurate view of what's going on in the company. So who is working for the company and who can access to what. Mm-hmm. So most of the time it starts with a diagnostics, because you somehow turn on the light for the very first time and do realize what's going on in the company, all those identities, accounts and everything. Mm-hmm. Most probably, even though it was not expected at first, you will start with some data quality, let's say, sub-project or initiative in order to clean up everything, find the right owner, the correct owner for everything. And then you will be able to enter into this compliance program by running and automating high TGC and SOD control on one hand, and access review on the other hand. And as you have seen here, the idea really is by automating this through a tool and with the right business partner, you can end up with something that your business user will love at the end of the day. And this is really the idea. Thank you again, Bob.
Thank you. Thanks so much.